Yes, definitely. So, a very, very good morning to everyone, and good morning to our respected both the speakers. GHRDC welcomes you to today's webinar titled Fostering Entrepreneurial Engineers, Nurturing Innovation and Business Skills in Education. Thank you, everyone, for taking out time and joining in with us today. We are very delighted to have with us experts from industry and academia for this discussion today. On behalf of GHRDC team, I welcome our expert panel members. GHRDC, as you would be aware, is a 25 years old education research firm dedicatedly working in the education sector in the area of ranking, training, mentoring, and research with the sole aim of working on upgrading the quality of education in various sectors and benchmarking the best of the educational institutions in our country. Fostering entrepreneurial engineers is very essential for driving innovation, economic development, and societal progress. It not only benefits individuals by providing them with opportunities for personal and professional growth, but also contributes to the advancement of industries and overall well-being of communities and nations. Today's topic is about the significance of fostering entrepreneurial engineers and therefore how much nurturing innovation and business skills in education is crucial for preparing students to thrive in a rapidly changing and competitive global landscape. We will now be inviting our distinguished speakers to talk about this very exciting topic. Also, I would request our wonderful attendees to type in any questions you have for our speakers in the chat box given along with the name of the speaker you want to address your questions to. Now, I would request Aradhna ma'am to introduce our eminent speakers for today.
Good morning and a very warm welcome to all of you. I'd like to now introduce our eminent speakers for today's webinar. First, I'll go to Mr. Abhinav Sinha, a passionate engineering graduate from BIT Mesra. Abhinav Sinha co-founded ECO in September of 2007 after working in Oracle for a couple of years, and after that in 6D Technologies for another few years. Back then, Abhinav Sinha, along with his brother, while working for the telecom startup 6D Technologies, sat together at the end of a frustrating day with their bankers and wondered, why do banks work just 6 hours a day for the public when telecom companies work 24/7 without any downtime? They mused on how banking services could be bought to consumers 24/7 via a network of business correspondents. Abhinav believed in the power of taking banking services to the vast majority in real time. What followed was a string of inventions patented all over the world, partnerships with the largest banks in India, and setting up of a vast chain of merchant outlets to work as business correspondents to provide banking services to the customers, especially from the weaker section of the society. True to its mission of taking banking and financial services to all, ECO has built over 100 services on its platform to cater to all needs a customer has from a bank, and even offered open APIs to democratize them. ECO is one of India's first business correspondents. Over the last 16 years, ECO has provided basic banking and digitizing services to over 6 crore micro entrepreneurship across India. At his personal end, Abhinav is an avid photographer and loves to spend his spare time reading books. We warmly welcome you to our webinar today, Abhinav. Professor S.D. Agassi is a highly qualified and experienced academician with a postgraduate degree in instrumentation and control engineering and a PhD in the area of study of effect of control components on process identification using artificial neural network from the formerly College of Engineering, Pune. Professor Agassi has a wealth of experience both in academia and industry, with 28 years of teaching in academia and 6 years of industry experience, and an in-depth understanding of both theoretical and practical aspects in his field. He is also credited with establishing the investigator of virtual laboratory in the university, and as the lead principal investigator of the lab, Professor Agassi is leading a team of researchers and engineers to develop innovative solutions in the field of virtual labs. an exciting and challenging role considering the increasing importance of virtual labs in the education sector. Professor Agassi has published several technical papers in national and international journals and conferences, and has been widely cited in technical papers and reference books. He has guided 4 doctoral students with several more ongoing, and has supervised a significant number of postgraduate students. Professor Agassi assumed charge as the Vice Chancellor of COEP Technological University in April this year. And we have Mekhla Sinha, the Executive Director of GHRDC, who will be acting as the moderator and for the discussion today. With this, I would request Mekhla to now take over and initiate the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ratna. I hope I'm audible, first of all.
Yes, Mekhla, you are audible.
Very, very warm welcome, Professor Agassi and Abhinav Sinha, to our webinar today. We are extremely excited to have both of you, and we're looking to a very vibrating and a very interesting discussion on this topic that we have chosen for the two of you, which is something that we feel is the need of the hour today, especially in engineering education. So I'll start off with my first question to Abhinav. Abhinav, you are a true example of an engineering graduate choosing to, start a journey of your own for entrepreneurial ventures for the last 2 decades and more. And you are someone who, the youth of today, the engineering graduates can really learn and look up to. So my first question to you is, how do you really define an entrepreneurial engineer?
First of all, thank you so much for having me over for the webinar. And let me take a first stab at the question. As students, when we kind of walk out of the institute, I don't think so we understand what entrepreneurs and what entrepreneurship is all about. And certainly at the point where we kind of graduated, and I graduated in 2003, certainly there wasn't much that we could kind of go back to our education that kind of helped us train in that perspective. And I think to keep my answer short, I would kind of just say this, that as long as individuals we end up having a mindset where we are ready to learn, I think a lot of individuals come with this aspect that we know how to do this, right? And it kind of builds up as you kind of become even more experienced, right? And even at the time of being a student, I think the question is, how do I make sure that my quotient of learning is very high? I've been running ECHO for over 16 years, and very often these days we end up recruiting fairly young people in our organization, right? Sometimes they are freshers, sometimes they are not, but they're certainly not more than 5 years of experience. And I often kind of, when I look at some of those guys, and when I look at some of their, interaction with seniors, and when they get in touch with real world problems to solve for, when there is pressure to be dealt with and things to be learned, my sometimes I think about, I wish they were more coachable, right? And I don't kind of blame only the students here, right? And it's also about the institution that they end up working at, right? There is certain amount of responsibility that we have, but in this age, where companies are wanting to grow faster, right? You will see very few examples of organization who have the ability or the capacity to indulge in training. So we want to run fast, we want to get youth in the company, right? So the desire to have young people is very high, right? And the desire to have young people extremely productive very soon is also very high. So there is a lot of intent here. I think the missing gap is that as growing organizations, we are unable to build a lot of capacity to training, which maybe the students need. And from a student side, the question is while the organizations continue to build their capability to train, are the students ready to be coachable in very, very chaotic circumstances, right? As long as that alignment is kind of, and I don't know how to train them in that, right? One would really have to think about it. But if you could get some kind of alignment there, I think a lot of progress from a student perspective will also happen. I think organizations will take benefit significantly if we are able to align this much better. And by the way, I would like to again reiterate that this is not a bookish problem that I'm sharing. This is a growing problem that we have. We kind of think about it every day. And let me take stop here. But that's a real world problem that we fix at this point in time.
Sure, Abhinav. Thank you. I'll come back to you later to really expand on this definition of an entrepreneurial engineer and what are the traits and qualities of such a student, and how can we really differentiate that from a student who's taking up a regular, career option and vis-a-vis taking up this entrepreneurial journey. But I move now to Professor Agashe. Professor Agashe, the question that I have for you is also very, very relevant and interesting in this context. First of all, do you think that entrepreneurial, as a career or as an option for engineers, do you think, is it a focus area for engineering institutions in India and abroad right now? And if yes, do you think we are on the right track in terms of approaches that we are doing? Or is there something missing in this entire, puzzle piece story? What are your views on that?
Yeah, Mikala, thank you so much. Let me answer this question as an academician. Because if you look at maybe the success parameters of every institution, most of the time you will find that what is the graduation rate? That means how many students are passing out from the institution. That's number one. Number two, how many students are getting placed is another criteria. And you will not find any criteria which says how many students have gone and started their own, or maybe after, maybe like Abhinav said, after 5 years, they have started their own. That criteria is missing, which clearly indicates that institutions have not understood the potential of entrepreneurship. Institutions have not understood the potential of students working in a different regime. That's where the situation today is. But let me tell you the welcome step which Government of India has taken, like National Education Policy 2020, which we have implemented from this year as a university. Now, in that policy, there is a clear indication that you can have different slots or verticals available for a student to take up. We, as a COEP Technological University, have 3 verticals which we always talk about. One vertical is somebody who is ready to work in industry, just ready to work in industry. The second lot of students is they are ready to work in industry, but taking heavy challenges, like learning to learn skills or learning new maybe skills and all such things. Those who have some research capabilities also, that's where we are talking about the second vertical, which we have now created, which is very, very interesting, is those who are interested. I'm not saying that all will be successful, but those who are interested in starting their own, there is a space for them to learn. There is a space created for them to learn those skills which are required to become an entrepreneur. It's not an easy journey. It's really not an easy journey. Let's understand that. And we do not claim, or any institution need not claim, because the success of entrepreneur cannot be next day. Getting a job next day and getting a salary slip after 1 month is a success. But in an entrepreneurship, like Abhinav said, you have to slog like anything. So that type of environment which we all have to create in the institution, that's what we are doing actually. And that's my take on this question, Mekla. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's a very interesting, take that you discussed today. And yes, these 3 verticals totally make sense. But do you really think, as an education sector in India, especially in engineering, we are doing enough for entrepreneurship as a stream, or you think that there should be some more, initiatives to be taken up by engineering institutions to encourage this kind of a law?
Yeah, let me, Abhinav, you rightly pointed out a finger towards academic institution, where most of the time what happens is the teaching or the learning is for examination. That's where the problem is. There are no enough avenues available for a student to learn on their own. it's basically rote learning, wherein if I take out papers from last 5 years, I know actually which paper will be there in 6th year. Now that's how the things are. Now in all these exercises, you will find that learning to learn skill, which we need to inculcate and develop in the minds of a student right in an academic institution, is missing. And that's where students say, that, okay, whatever is there in the curriculum is what I have to study. Once I go there, maybe that salary will drive me for new things, and that's it. So those skills which we all need to inculcate, and that is where some fundamental changes are required in our examination system. Curriculum per se, NEP has given us a lot of freedom to plan the curriculum and ask the student for multiple entry, multiple exit, and so many other things. But when it comes to evaluation, why the evaluation should be like, how do you remember certain things? Can you do certain things? Like problem-based learning, project-based learning, all such things need to be part of curriculum, need to be part of life of a faculty. And I must tell here, all my faculty colleagues must take interest in how differently I can evaluate a student. Not that at the end of the semester, asking him to sit for 3 hours. Within 3 hours, I judge him for 30 hours. I think that's not a good idea. And that's what is needed to be done. That's what is my take on this.
So basically what you're saying is that a big challenge that lies in front of us as an education institution sector in India is the mindset and is the kind of attitude we've been having towards entrepreneurship for the last many decades, be it faculty, be it the government authorities or any other platform, where it is just being looked at as a curriculum which needs to be finished and then you move on to the next agenda. But actually what you're saying is that it needs to be looked at in a very holistic way. And, we have to now look beyond our books and our curriculum and our, so-called pedagogy. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely right. Because see what had happened in last so many years, we concentrated more on graduating students. We never concentrated on making them engineers. And the number has grown to such an extent that it becomes a factory of producing engineers. So naturally, from where are you going to get good faculty members who are ready to experiment with the student? These are all academic experiments, and these experiments are responsible for generations to come. And that's where the holistic approach which a faculty member has to take in training those students for maybe identifying the future challenges and facing them. That's missing because it is in the boundary saying that you have to have a paper of 60 marks or 100 marks, those many questions, this much option, no freedom to teacher. That's where the problem is. And we all have to come out of that shell now. It's high time now. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Abhinav, my next question is actually to you. So this question will really stitch what sir has just shared very effectively into our conversation, which we'll now take up. If you had to differentiate the qualities or the skills of an entrepreneurial engineer in an engineering institution, what are those 5 top emotional and business skills that you would say that are the defining skills or emotional skills or business skills that would really be the outlier in identifying, yes, this is the kind of entrepreneurial engineer that, we should gonna look out for in an institution?
Sure. Let me think about this a little and share my thoughts. First of all, not an easy question to identify because, as a student of engineering, I didn't kind of, graduate as an entrepreneur, right? I kind of took up a job, right? And what really triggered inside was the fact that, one kind of got placed in a circumstance which was hard enough for you to kind of say, oh my God, you have to now fight it out, right? So you kind of start off with a job for certain, not getting into details, but certain interesting events. You kind of, end up at a small organization. It's a bunch of 10, 15 people who are trying to do an extremely large amount of work, right? And very honestly sharing that it is probably almost everybody would have a withdrawal symptom there, And I wouldn't say that, everybody's brave and all of those things. I think every entrepreneur would also go through a withdrawal symptom saying, oh my God, this is too tough. Let me just back off, right? And I'm sure there are people who back off, but there are few who say, hey, maybe I can go one step forward. And we were one amongst those, who were saying that, we'll take one step forward. And you often then are able to create a solution for some problem that you had, and you take the next forward. And that's how, kind of you build the journey. So I, as a person, wasn't straight off as an entrepreneur, and there are many. And so a couple of things that I would really want to point out is, I think, again, I would reiterate one's ability to learn. I think in those circumstances, one was very open to learning, right? That is one. I think the second is, and I don't know how to kind of, figure this out from a student's perspective, is your ability to solve a problem, right? You should always, as entrepreneurs, even after 16, 17 years, all what we do every day is problem solving, right? There is some or the other problem that we are always solving for, right? And as entrepreneurs, what are we expected, right? We are expected to create options here, right? We really don't know which option is going to work, right? We are the ones who are saying to others, these are the three options. Let's try the first one out, right? You kind of evaluate using gut, data, experience, etc., etc. But you are really somebody who's creating options rather than a person who's saying, hey, tell me what needs to be done, right? There is nothing wrong in saying, there are many people, and we work with a lot of professionals who are way better when it comes to executing, right? But they are not the ones who are probably creating options. So, and I think how do you create options? If you keep your mind open, if you are ready to learn, see, while I run a company in financial services, we keep our eyes open to say, is there something that I can learn from e-commerce? Is there something that I can learn from food delivery, right? And by the way, there are many things, right? Because we are living in a I live in Gurgaon. There are so many startups in and around. There's so many things to learn from other entrepreneurs, who are scaling. So again, I would reiterate, ability to solve problems, right? Ability to learn a lot. I think you need to be a sponge. You literally have to be a sponge, because every day they, either life or companies throwing a curveball at you, and you really have to learn quickly. And I think the third, not sure whether you really need it right from the beginning, is I think a little bit quotient of leadership. I think some amount, right? I don't think so. Again, going back to my example, I wasn't a club president, or I wasn't, an MC in an event. But I do believe that even in a friend circle, even if it was to, go out on a Saturday to have fun, maybe we were the ones who were saying, we were dragging the rest of the friends together to go in a particular direction, right? A little bit of leadership quotient, if you have it, probably it then starts to, if you're in an entrepreneurial setup, then you're able to nurture it and make it even bigger. So I think there are many more skills than I can think about, but ability to solve problems, certainly. And again, reiterate, and I don't know how much to emphasize ability to learn. And I know it's a tricky forum to share this, but I often see that students from top tier institutes are very hard to train. And they're great. They're fantastic in many skills, but sometimes I find them very hard to train. And third is some amount of leadership quotient probably has to be there.
Fantastic. I think you've really simplified these skills. They're not something out of the extraordinary and something which, you would say, okay, oh, this really stands out, but it's very simple, yet it's very direct. And it's something that the institutions can definitely take a note of. But I will ask you one more point here, which I think is a very important piece to the list of skill sets and attributes that an entrepreneurial engineer should have. And we all know that an entrepreneurial journey requires immense amount of emotional capacity to also wither it through, right? We've seen a lot of companies getting set up and then getting wrapped up, and emotionally this taking a toll on the people who set it up. So what, according to you, would be the emotional skills that the budding entrepreneurial, engineers should be having to handle this? And I think this question is really for the student community who are, aspiring to become entrepreneurs after completing their engineers. But I think this is something very important for them to take a look.
I couple of things. One is, if I hope there are students who are listening who are aspiring to be entrepreneurs. I would certainly say that the journey is tough and it should not be done alone. There are certainly great examples of solo entrepreneurs making it really big, but I do believe that those guys are exceptions, right? More often than not, you will see that there is always one more person, if not more, right? I think that's also because one is complementary skill sets is always helpful. The other is one can always have a bad day, bad week, bad month, and the others can kind of pull you through emotionally, work-wise, and all of those things. So I think sole entrepreneurship is great, but I do believe that if you can't find it, you have no other option. But you must look for somebody who can be in this journey with you. I think that's important. I think the other thing which is a characteristics for entrepreneurs, I think they're passionate, right? At the end of the day, and there is some amount of what do I say, irrationality about that passion, right? Because more often than not, the idea that you're choosing or the problem that you're solving for, that you're trying to solve is is typically difficult, right? And more often than not, you either others around you are going to say this is very hard, or you yourself will realize that it is very hard, because like I said earlier, you'll create options and more often than not those options are not working, right? So there is a level of passionate and irrationality about it, and very often and my co-founder Abhishek says this a lot better than I do, is that I think, as children, if we have a skill which is to do with music, if it's to do with playing badminton or playing cricket, or you're great at sketching, I think it's important to nurture. We often as students, end up leaving some of our of us some of these skills that we are born with, which defines us. But because of education, because of the need to perform well in exams, we often see that, and especially in our generation, we saw that people would kind of leave their ability to music, ability to play, ability to scale. I think those are also so muscle memories that one has to build to actually dive into when think about it. You have your manager or you yourself you've chosen a big problem which is hard to solve for. Either you have to think out of the box. Where is the muscle memory to think out of the box? There is no muscle memory to think out of the box. Probably the only way to build that muscle memory to think out the box is not, maybe there is something to do with studies and exams and basic curriculum that everyone's going through, but I do believe that dipping into your skill that you were born with, right? You were great at sketching, you were great at music, you were great at skill, you were doing out of the box things there. That's how you were better at sketching, right? That's probably one area which is God gifted and which can help in building your muscle memory, which will probably be used 25 years later when either you or your manager is going to say, hey, I need an out of box solution. But where is that muscle memory to do that, right? There isn't any, right? So I would again go back to say that I think passion, irrationality, and if you have this ability, if you are one who's been God gifted with one of these extra skills, my only thing is one got to nurture it. It's very hard, but I think it's as one, somebody very, very, sort of a mentor once told us that, this was a gentleman, he teaches yoga. And, we said that to him, we said that, we don't have time to do yoga in a day. He said that, if you drive a car, do you say that you don't have time to get to a petrol station to get yourself fuel? Obviously, the answer is no, and you kind of stop your car and you get your fuel, right? And the thing was, yeah, you stop your day and you figure out how to do yoga, right? So I think it's probably very similar that, we have to stop. We have to stop and nurture a skill which will help us dive into this muscle memory of thinking out of the box. Otherwise, where do you do this? There are people who are, not all of us are Steve Jobs, and who knows what Steve Jobs was practicing back home, right? And sharpening his skills. Of many of these great entrepreneurs that we often read about. We always read about their business. How much do we know what else they were doing outside of it to actually sharpen their skill sets of thinking out of the box? Not once, but almost on a daily basis you have to, right? And so yeah, I would kind of take a pause there.
Thank you. Thank you. This was very beautifully summarized and something so, effective and something so needed for our generation today, especially when we have so much distraction and areas, where we get completely out of alignment. And you're telling them stick to a schedule or some kind of a thing which really gets you that breather, which helps your creative energies unleash, and that's where you start getting ideas about what you need to do, and then just reset your entire your entire personality, your thoughts and everything. So I think that's beautifully said. Here I would like to bring a very important dimension for both Professor Agashe and Abhinav Sinha. There is the concept of failure, which is very, very something which is looked at in a very negative light by students, by the education community, by the faculty, by entrepreneurs, when they fail, and failure is obviously going to happen at some point, either in education or even when you are, pursuing your entrepreneurship. We all know that the rate of failure can be really very high. Maybe if both of you can reiterate that it's okay to fail, and that's how we all learn actually. I think that will be a big message that we go out to students today, to experiment, to take up entrepreneurial journey and not worry about failing. So what are your views on that, Professor Agashe?
Yeah, it's very, very essential that in the early days, you need to know what is the consequence of failing actually. See, why people regret or don't take failing as a positive sign. Reason is society is not looking at failure in a positive manner. That's number one. Now, I just give you one experiment which I am doing with my students for last 10 years. And this has, I got that feedback, of course, and this has helped many students. I said, in my subject, the examination will be open book examination. And you will have to be there in the exam hall for 8 hours, not 3 hours. It's an extended number of hours which you will have to work. And this examination is carried out in 3 steps. One is individual, where we want to test your concepts, not mugging up, but by giving some tricks and by asking some nasty questions. How do you do in basics? Because your fundamentals must be absolutely right, no issue on that. The second thing is basically a group learning. I always believe that examination is another platform for learning, not passing or failing. I don't think that examination is meant for passing or failing. Examination is meant for how much he or she has learned. It's not passing or failing. There, the peer learning is so huge that you have been given an open-ended problem, as Abhinav was talking about. It's an open-ended problem. I always call that as non-Googleable question. So if you go for that non-Googleable question, what happens is then you have to think. Situation is given to you, and you will be given a task to perform as a group, for which you have to ask for information. See, this is where the biggest trouble with the student. They don't ask questions. That's the trouble. So how do you motivate them to ask questions? First half an hour is given to you that you can ask any question. No question is a silly question, but that question will make sure that the situation will be known to you from the other side of the story. You may be from a particular fraternity like instrumentation and control. Now you have to develop questions. You have to talk to somebody who is in front of you and ask nice questions. Prepare the background for your problem solving. And then onwards, you are free to go anywhere, talk to anybody in the world. You are allowed to use mobile phones. You are allowed to use internet. And the only message given to them is, don't waste your time in search engines, because this answer is not available. I can guarantee you that. So better you focus more on what you know and what best you can think about. That's your answer. That's your solution. At the same time, the message is given to them that if you are unprofessional for 4 years of engineering, how can you become professional next day? Somebody has started you paying something. That's absolutely not. And that is where The professionalism has to be there. So each student is monitored, maybe through, it's not a policing, but students are monitored. What are they doing? How they are behaving, how they are discussing, all those things are monitored. And at the end of the examination, this is very important. At the end of the examination, every student is given a chance to justify his or her solution, or a group is given a chance to justify. Because sometimes what happens, I'm not very good in writing the solutions. I may not in a position to express it nicely, but I know what I have done. If I am passionate about my idea, and if I know my solution is responsibility of mine, is the solution is perfect. So in whichever language, in whichever form, please express. And that gives them a chance to justify their stand, though they can speak, and such things will happen. At the end of the 8 hours, you are so exhausted that no examination has happened on this campus for 8 hours. And it's something which motivates students, saying that, oh, we have learned something, and those problems are industry related problems, application oriented problems, wherein you ask the students that whatever you are learning in theory is useful in practice. Most of the time, in most of the platforms, it is said that whatever you teach is not there in industry. I have an objection to that statement. I say whatever we teach is the future and is the thing which is industry is going to practice. And that's the reason, if the connect is there, student realize that yes, I'm learning something which is useful for me. And that's what has to happen. And slowly, if all the teachers start performing such experiments, I'm not saying that this experiment, but probably such experiments, the entire community of students will start thinking. What is missing is they don't think, they don't ask questions, they don't be disciplined. So you have to nurture those habits in them, which will be useful for them in their professional life. That's what we keep on doing, actually.
Very well said, Professor Agashe. Very well said, and I highly commend and appreciate this initiative that you have taken with your group of students. And in fact, there's a lot to learn for other education institutions in the engineering sector from this initiative, where they can also experiment with their group of students, because what you're teaching and inculcating within them are life skills. They're not just academic skills or business skills or various other skills that we really think of. These are life skills. And I think one very important thing that's getting inculcated here is discipline and consistency, because for those 8 hours, they're very, very focused. They have to be disciplined. They have to be absolutely on their feet to be able to deal with whatever is coming through to them. So that was very well said. Abhinav, I have the same question to you, which I asked Professor Agashe. A lot of times institutions face a group of students who are wanting to become entrepreneurs, but due to their fear of failure, they of course decide not to. What is your thought on this, and what would you say to such students who fear failure?
On this one, I think failure is a reality. One. Second is that I think as the startup ecosystem is getting more mature here in India, I think both two things, and I think these are really two tracks of two rails in a rail track, I think, which is happening in parallel. One is there are a lot of incredibly interesting and nice, inspiring success stories out there, right? But I think there is genuine realization that there are only so many success stories, right? For example, Prime Minister, I think a couple of weeks back, had quoted that India now has over 100,000 startups registered, right? And we are boasting of 100 unicorns right now, right? That's 1%. That's 1%, right? 1% gets to a unicorn status, right? And I think so. Both of these things are happening in parallel. There are incredible success stories, and the realization that there is only 1%, right? So to some extent, I think people who are choosing to become entrepreneurs, if not on day one, they are certainly realizing this fact of life, right? Now, having said that, I think your question is about how do you kind of train them to be okay with failures, right? Wow, I think it's a hard one. I think certainly it's a lot to do with the mindset of the individual. But let me share a few other things. Even let me again share something that we are trying to do incorporate in Echo. It's something not that we've started, but let me just share something. Right now, all historically, when we do performance management of people, right? They are often, people who are high performance are people maybe who have done really, kind of got the revenues to kind of scale really up. If it was about technology guys, somebody who kind of really created a great technology which helped us scale, etc., etc. So you're always looking for these, especially the 5 pointers. Let's say 5 is best and 1 is bad. The outstanding guys. You're always looking for somebody who did something spectacular, right? And the definition of spectacular for ease of this conversation is either you've taken the revenue really high, you've brought the cost down, or you've built something that's incredible, right? And by the way, think about it. Each of companies, we are, by our mentors, we are told that we should have values of the company, right? So people will define values, and so have we, right? Courage, truth, agility, etc., etc. Right? Every company, basis of their own maturity, defines values. But how often do we actually do performance management on values rather than the outcomes? Right? Very often we fall into this trap that the performance management is based on the outcome and not the values, right? And more often, who knows that the best performer may not very score really highly on values chart, right? And so one of the things that we are really trying to kind of incorporate is a point system, right? And the question is, it's imagine values being gamified, right? I score every day, right? So let's say if it is about creativity, right? Then let's say, and if we create a process, where people who have, let's say, read books, if they post that information in the intranet of the company, so they are given 1 point on creativity, right? If somebody is something to do with customer service, if somebody does something, score it, right? And publish that as a leadership board, right? It's and that leadership board should have nothing to do with the outcome of that exercise, right? It has nothing to do with the outcome of the exercise. Exclude the outcome from the input, just measure the input and create a leaderboard out of it. And the leaderboard really says how close am I, is my actions or a day-to-day activity or behavior, etc., closely aligned to the values of the company, right? And not that we have instituted that, but I'm very sure that people who may score really high on values may not really be the ones whose initiatives created the maximum output. Sometimes it does not happen, right? It broke all our heart when India lost the World Cup, right? We probably all know that India was the best team, right? It is undoubted that India was the best team, but the outcome did not happen, but the input certainly was there, right? And so I think if we take this example back to the college, the question is today, jokingly, it's been about 20 years that we finish our engineering. Even whenever friends kind of sit together, we continue to pull the leg of our friend who scored the least, right? Or who scored the highest, right? The question is, we really don't know any of the value scores that we may have exhibited, right? Who was in leadership, creativity, agility, etc., etc. So, I do believe that we should articulate some of these qualities, values, and have a leadership. It should be gamified. I should know that, I am, for example, look at games. Look at how kids get attracted to games, especially in these online world. Globally, they know in a very popular game that I'm standing at 512th position. And every day they're fighting to get to the 500th position and thereafter, right? Now, the question is, how do you kind of take similar process and institute either in the college or in companies? We are certainly, colleges, I think, even more tougher environment to set this up. But at least as an organization, we are trying to do this, where you really try, and in one of those things, you could actually measure failures. I think measure even measuring failures could mean, see, only people who fail are the people who take initiatives, right? The question is, if we are able to measure initiatives rather than the outcomes, so they somewhere you have to encourage to some extent failures too, right? And at least one of the ways that we're trying to think about is this value scoreboard. If you are able to and publish it, and there has to be a reward to people who are up there. So, yeah.
Wonderful. I mean, what you're basically saying is to the students that show up as authentically as possible and continue to show up. And secondly,
Certainly.
Don't worry too much about the outcome, because that anyways is beyond your, control at a lot of times, in fact, majority of the times. But make sure that you keep showing up and do your part. And secondly, have fun, like we talked about the gaming concept very nicely. I think that should definitely resonate with our young, engineer graduates who are planning to take up an entrepreneurial journey, and this will be something very, very encouraging for them. Before we take up questions from the attendees and from various student communities who have posted questions for both Professor Agashe and Abhinav Sinha, even separately to us, I would like to just ask one question to Professor Agashe before we move on to that set of questions from the audience. Professor Agashe, you talked about how curriculum needs to be changed. You talked about the mindset of the faculty, how authorities need to look at education in a different light, how it needs to be more of an experiment and to look at a student's mentality and holistically. If you had to talk about some general initiatives or the kind of ecosystem that we need to set up in India in engineering education sector that should be taken up in general by most of the institutions who are really interested in pushing this agenda ahead, what kind of initiatives would you advise to engineering education sector in India, that these are the 2 or 3 things that we must continue doing and in order to encourage entrepreneurial engineers?
Yeah, because while reading my introduction, you talked about a project which we are doing for last almost 14 years. And that's what is called as a virtual lab project, wherein most of the time what happens, and that's where the problem comes in education system. The experiments are same, readings are same, conclusions are same, students are different. That's the only thing. So if you keep on doing certain things, what is going to happen is there is no innovation in your experiments. And I always keep on saying that the technology is used least in technical institutions. That's where I come from. Now, when I say this, what is important is most of the time this excuse is given by my faculty fraternity, saying that the number of teachers are less. But who has taught you to use technology to reduce your burden of the clerical work? And that is where I just want to give you an example. Similar examples must be thought of by many institutions, and my faculty colleagues, I'm sure they will keep on experimenting. Now, when we were developing virtual labs, we said, what do you need actually? If you really look at today's program of any student, he is there in an institution for 6 to 8 hours maximum 8 hours. 16 hours, you have no control on that. Still, world expect that you are responsible for the outcome. That's where the problem is. Now, we said, how can I increase my territory on the students apart from the education or in academic institutions? How do I extend that? And the best example is the virtual labs, where you go anywhere, like game, you start playing with that virtual lab, keep on performing those experiments. And what is important, which we have developed at COEP, is those experiments are unique for every student. All the data will get changed, everything will get changed. So there is nothing called as copying actually. Every time there is a challenging assignments. And at the end of the experiment, there are certain competencies which are really spelled out right in the beginning. And these competencies, while performing the experiments, are monitored. So at the end of the experiment, a student will get his grade report saying that out of these 6 competencies, you have done well in 4, but these 2 you have not. Either you have to go back and learn and do it again. It's like a game. And then come again. We are giving you chance because it's not a failure there. It's not a repeat. Keep on doing that. So that consistency will help that student. So we have to create such an environment where what is required in entrepreneurship better than this actually. You have to keep on monitoring your performance, and you have to keep on making sure that the benchmark is achieved. Keep on doing that always. New things are happening, and that will give the student to maybe a new way of thinking. Lastly, I just add one experiment, which one of the lab is remote controlled. That means any student of the country can use my pilot plants wherever he or she is. Now, what will happen? The challenge given, otherwise running a plant is a procedure. But the problem statement given to student is the previous group has performed this experiment using this much energy. Can you do it in less than this? Do whatever you want to. I'm giving you the plant in your custody. Do whatever you want to do. Experiment in a way you want to and get the answer. What is important is you are being given the freedom. Now it is your responsibility to succeed. Now that's the ecosystem which we have to create on the campus. Instead of saying that these many students are failed or these many students have passed, instead of these many students have different ability, may not be an academic ability, but different ability. And that's where that multiple entry, multiple exit, all such systems will be very, very useful. That's my take on that.
So basically what you're saying is the KPIs itself should be changed. The areas that we are assessing them on should be reviewed completely.
Yeah, exactly. That's what has to happen. And that is where the mindset of a faculty member needs to be changed. Instead of just saying that pass or fail, these are the 6 areas I'm going to check. Out of that, oh, fine, these 3 areas you are good. But if you want, you can improve. It's not that you have failed. These are your strong points. Go on capitalizing on that. And that can happen actually.
Actually, sir, this beautifully correlates to Abhinav's points about being a learner, about having an open mindset about learning. I think this very, very beautifully connects. This tool that you have just shared for other institutions to also follow, it really is the answer to practice and experiment with some of these concepts that even Abhinav has been talking about. And I think it really is an idea which educational institutions can take up. So Neha, would you like to now take up the questions which the attendees and the student community have sent to us, especially for Professor Agashe and Abhinav Sinha?
Yeah. So we do have some questions, some very interesting one. So we have one question from Mr. Sinha. It's a very practical question actually. So one of the students have asked that what are the initial challenges the student faces once he or she embarks on his journey of entrepreneurship, and what would be your advice to such student?
Many a times I've been faced with this question, and jokingly I often say that you should ask this question and know too much before you start the journey, else the answers will start to be no and not starting the journey. So ignorance, sometimes people say ignorance is bliss, right? Especially in entrepreneurship, I think ignorance is bliss. If we knew too much how tough these journeys are, then many of us would have decided otherwise. But on a serious note, I think there are many challenges. I think just trying to put together your first set of 2 or 3 guys who will come together, resonate on a single problem, and try and solve it. I think that's really the first, right? One of us will have an idea, right? Or we will identify a problem, and we'll have to galvanize at least one more person to think alike, right? I think that's really the first problem. And I have a couple of friends, who decided to be entrepreneurs in, let's say, their mid-30s. It's very hard for them to now find, right? Because the community of their peers have already decided whether they are entrepreneurs or they're working in a corporate or whatever. They've already made their big life choices, right? It's very hard, for instance, if I had to start a company today, how do I look for co-founders? It's going to be really hard. I'm not surrounded with people like that, right? Who are about to get started, right? Most of my peers, have already made their life choices, right? So only people that I would be able to dive into some of the younger colleagues that who I'm now introduced to, right? And so I think that's the first problem. And I think that's also the first test, right? If you're able to solve that problem, get one more person to come alongside, I think in a funnel of success, you've already crossed, I don't know how many people would even cross that barrier. You just won't even cross that barrier. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think it was a very insightful answer. So we have one more question, which is for Professor Vashi. It's a very interesting one again. What role can mentorship programs play in helping students to develop that business acumen and entrepreneurial mindset?
See, the point is, whenever you are learning something, there must be somebody for hand-holding. You see that confidence you have to get that you are not alone. That's the first thing. Now, if you have that confidence, so from where are you going to get the confidence? All these mentorship programs which are being designed at the institute, you will find those mentors who have already achieved a particular objective. They are known in their circle. And that's where knowing them, working with them will give you a different kind of exposure. See, what is important for any student actually is the exposure. If you are getting an exposure by talking with a mentor, maybe in a couple of days, that helps you a lot. You are ahead of the stream. And that's why whenever that mentorship program is there, the students must take those mentors seriously, because he wanted to or she wanted to tell you something which is very, very important for your life. So you have to have faith in mentor. That's most important thing. That's what I feel.
Yes, absolutely, sir. And very, very important points both of you have shared today. I think the points that both of you have shared, both for engineering institutions and students, are very direct, very simple, and yet something that is very, very doable for all, the concerned stakeholders that we have today on our platform. This program is also live on our social media platforms today. So a lot of our viewers are also viewing this and, having a lot of questions and insights based on whatever we have discussed. But I'm truly, truly grateful to both of you for sparing this time. And I can't, begin to even tell you how important it is for engineering education sector to start in a very focused way, encouraging entrepreneurial engineers to start this journey. I think we're doing it a lot compared to the last decade or so, but I think there's a scope to do a lot more. And like you said, sir, there are so many things that we can experiment with if we can just open ourselves to the mindset of not just looking at the typical way of assessments and really go beyond them. There is a whole lot of progress that we can make on this front. So on that note, I would really, really like to express my heartfelt gratitude to both of you. It was so wonderful to have you, and I think this discussion could have gone on. We've received many more questions from our attendees, from our students, from our institution, ecosystem for both of you. But due to paucity of time, we will end it here. Neha, over to you for a closing note.
Yeah. Thank you, Meghla, and thank you, everyone. I think we all will agree that this was a very, very fruitful and insightful session. It must have been an eye-opener to all of students and attendees who have joined in. And on behalf of the whole GHRDC team, I would like to express my appreciation and gratitude for all the attendees who have taken out time and attended the webinar. And our very sincere thanks to this expert panel of members today. And your presence has been invaluable and undoubtedly has made this webinar a very great success. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Recording of this webinar with both of you on email, and we'll also connect both of you on a separate note.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.